Hey guys, tonight we're rewinding to a world that smelled like progress and burns like it too. A city that wakes not to birdsong but to the hiss of steam, the clatter of gears and the endless coughing of chimneys stacked like a forest of iron trunks. You probably won't survive this, at least not without a handkerchief over your face and a sense of humor. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? What's your local time right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes in a dawn that glows not with sunlight but with smoke-tinted gold, the sky a dirty watercolor of orange and gray. It's sometime in the mid-19th century, and you're standing on a cobblestone street slick with last night's soot and the faint shimmer of condensation dripping from pipes that hum like restless animals. The air has weight, like it's been chewed before you breathe it. Around you, the city feels alive, alive in that unsettling mechanical way a sleeping dog twitches in its dreams. You hear a low whistle in the distance, the kind that makes people glance instinctively toward the mills, because in this world, the whistle is law. The Industrial Revolution has reshaped everything: work, sleep, hunger, even hope, and whether you like it or not, you're in its lungs now. A mainstream historical fact for you. By the 1850s, over half of Britain's population lived in cities, marking the first time in human history that urban life outnumbered rural. It's the beginning of everything modern, but also the end of everything familiar. You can't help but notice how people move differently here. Faster, narrower, as if time itself is rationed. A woman passes carrying a coal scuttle, her face blackened but her eyes sharp, a reminder that beauty has adapted to survival. There's a horse clopping by, dragging a cart of factory waste, and you realize it's not just the people working. Everything works, even the animals, even the air. The city doesn't rest, it expands. That's progress for you. Expansion disguised as exhaustion. A man in a top hat pauses by a lamppost, consulting a tiny brass watch like it's an oracle. Timekeeping has become a civic religion, and factories its temples. It's not superstition anymore that rules people's lives. It's the schedule. Punctuality is virtue, someone once wrote in a pamphlet, though you're fairly sure they didn't have to clean the machines that made that virtue possible. Somewhere, a preacher's voice rises, reminding everyone that hard work brings salvation, and you can't tell if he's talking about heaven or the cotton mill. The fringe tidbit tonight: historians note that some early factory owners believed chimney smoke was a sign of moral health. A city without soot was a city without soul. Imagine explaining that to your lungs. You step closer to a factory door and feel its heat bleeding through the iron steam like breath, gears like heartbeats. Inside, workers move in sync, a choreography of repetition that's both mesmerizing and horrifying. The rhythm of progress sounds suspiciously like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. Someone once said cities are mankind's greatest inventions and greatest mistakes, often in the same sentence, and you begin to understand why. There's an open scholarly debate about whether industrialization liberated the working class or simply trapped them in a new form of dependence, one with clocks instead of chains. You watch a man punch a time card, and wonder if freedom can be quantified in minutes. The wind shifts, bringing a sour metallic taste, iron, oil, and the faint sweetness of bread from a nearby bakery where the flour is gray from ash. You laugh quietly at the absurdity of it all. Civilization smells like breakfast and burnt coal. A steam train shrieks in the distance, its whistle stretching across rooftops, slicing through dreams. You tilt your head upward, staring at the gray halo that crowns the city, a crown no monarch would envy. You start to think that the real revolution isn't in the machines but in the mindset. People have learned to live surrounded by noise, to call chaos normal. It's oddly comforting. in a masochistic way, how adaptable humans are. Somewhere, a dog barks at its own echo bouncing between walls, and you realize the city has learned to speak too, in whistles, rattles, and sighs. You keep walking, shoes crunching on cinders, feeling history settle on your skin like invisible dust. The morning stretches ahead like an assembly line, monotonous, inevitable, humming. You pass a boy selling newspapers, his voice cracking but persistent. Progress marches on, he yells. You almost answer, yes, but at what cost? Then think better of it. The city isn't listening. The city is too busy inventing tomorrow. You wake to a sound that feels like it's inside your skull, the deep metallic heartbeat of machinery echoing through the walls, through the streets, through the people themselves. You don't own time anymore. You rent it from the factory bell. When it rings, you move. When it stops, you collapse. The rhythm of your life has been replaced by iron and steam, and you wonder when breathing became a mechanical act. The city around you twitches into motion long before sunrise, and you join the flow of workers heading toward the brick leviathan at the end of the lane, where tall windows glow orange like the mouth of some industrial god. The cobblestones are slick with oil and half-frozen rain. You can feel the grit under your boots, the same grit that fills every lung in this district. Someone ahead of you is coughing, a wet, heavy sound that blends into the rhythm of footsteps, wheels, and horses snorting through the fog. You can tell who's been here the longest by the grayish tint on their clothes, their skin, even their hair. In this city, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's next to impossible. The massive doors of the mill groan open, and you're swallowed into its cavernous belly. Inside, the air hums with motion, belts whipping over pulleys, pistons pumping, looms clattering in endless repetition. Every sound overlaps into a single vibrating tone, like the city itself has a pulse. You think of it as a symphony of exhaustion, every worker an instrument, every sigh a note, a mainstream historical fact. By the 1830s, the average British textile worker spent over 70 hours a week at the looms, often in rooms so loud they went partially deaf by 30. The overseer's whistle cuts through the clatter like a conductor's baton, and everyone adjusts their rhythm instantly. You try to keep up, but the machine doesn't care about human pace, it sets its own. You reach for a lever, your fingers trembling slightly from the vibration that runs through the entire floor. It's not fear, not quite, just the strange intimacy of being synchronized with something inhuman. The irony isn't lost on you that this is supposed to be progress, humanity in harmony with its own inventions. Still, you can't help but feel like the invention is doing the leading. A fringe tidbit whispers through your mind. Some early mills experimented with moral music, playing hymns through pipes to keep workers calm, but the melodies quickly disappeared under the grinding noise, as if even piety couldn't compete with profit. You imagine angels trying to sing over pistons and losing. Someone beside you hums a folk tune anyway, just loud enough to be swallowed by the din. Its resistance in miniature, a heartbeat against the machine's drum. The heat builds fast. You can smell sweat and oil merging into something metallic and strangely sweet. The cotton fibers floating in the air sparkle in the lamplight like fairy dust, except they cut your throat when you breathe. There's a saying here, you can tell a weaver by the cough. You cough. Everyone does. You notice the women across the row working faster, their fingers blurred from speed, and realize they've learned to keep motion separate from thought. If you think too long, you slow down, and the machine doesn't tolerate hesitation. The walls vibrate gently, the whole structure breathing with a strange rhythm, inhale steam, exhale product. Somewhere near the back a man's sleeve catches in a gear, and for a split second the rhythm falters. Then someone stops the wheel. There's shouting, a groan, and the machine starts again. You flinch at the speed of recovery. People become part of the pattern, replaceable stitches in an infinite fabric. There's an open scholarly debate about whether industrial discipline created a new moral order or simply industrialized obedience. You glance around at faces blank as mirrors and suspect the latter. Still, there's a dark beauty to the uniformity. Hundreds of bodies moving in unison like the city's own nervous system. You can feel your heartbeat aligning to it, your thoughts syncing with the repetition. Outside, the whistle blows again. It means lunch, though lunch is a stretch. A piece of bread, maybe an onion, eaten in the shadow of the building. The moment you stop working, the silence feels violent, too large to handle. People talk in quick bursts about the weather, about a neighbor's injury, about nothing at all, then shuffle back to their stations. One woman jokes, "At least we get to live in a poem someday." You smile because she's probably right. Future generations will romanticize this. The smoke, the effort, the progress. They'll call it noble. You'll just call it loud. As you step outside at dusk, the world still hums in your bones, like the machine has followed you home. You pause, staring up at the factory roofline, silhouetted against the sunset, a jagged crown of chimneys puffing their royal clouds. Somewhere in that smoke your breath disappears too, indistinguishable from everyone else's. You stretch your fingers, still trembling, and laugh quietly. You can't hear yourself. The city has already decided what rhythm you'll sleep to. You step out from the factory gates into a street that doesn't seem to end. A living corridor of bodies, carts, and noise so dense it feels like the air itself has texture. It presses against your chest, thick and uncooperative, a mixture of coal smoke, horse droppings, sweat, and the sour perfume of uncollected waste. You take a breath and instantly regret it. The industrial city, as it's proudly called by the pamphlets in the post office, is less a place you live in and more a place you survive. Every surface is occupied, every stoop, every alley, every inch of curb claimed by someone or something that breathes. You pass a row of tenement houses that look like stacked bricks of exhaustion, each window glowing faintly with candlelight through grime-streaked glass. The sound of coughing leaks through the walls, blending with the cries of peddlers and the rattle of wheels. You look up and realize you haven't seen real sky in hours, just a ceiling of gray that never lifts. They say the sun still rises here, but you'd have to climb a factory chimney to prove it. The air tastes like iron filings and damp wood, and you wonder if lungs can forget what clean feels like. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. In London, by the 1870s, the population had passed 4 million, packed so tightly that entire families often lived in a single room without plumbing, heat, or privacy. And yet, somehow, people laughed, worked, courted, sang, proof that humanity can bloom even in ash. A little girl darts past your legs, barefoot, clutching a crust of bread like its treasure. Her laughter cuts through the grime for half a second before vanishing around a corner. You almost follow her, but a carriage roars by, splattering the hem of your coat with mud so black it looks like ink. You smile weakly. You're part of the story now. Somewhere in the distance, a street organ wheezes out a cheerful tune that fights valiantly against the ambient roar of life. You think about how strange it is that sound, even ugly sound, can make people feel less alone. The sidewalks are a maze of markets, fish laid out beside coal heaps, boot polish next to turnips, soap stacked like relics no one can afford. You catch sight of a man selling fresh air in tiny glass bottles, a real thing that actually happened in the smoggiest years. A fringe tidbit worth savoring. Some Victorian entrepreneurs in England and Paris bottled mountain air for urban sale, claiming it could restore moral vigor. You imagine someone opening one of those bottles in this crowd, the contents instantly defeated by the reality outside. It's hard not to laugh. Even the scams here are poetic. You turn onto a narrower lane where laundry sags above your head like surrender flags. A woman is yelling at a butcher, accusing him of watering down his blood puddings, while a preacher on the corner shouts about repentance over the clang of hammers. You wonder if God can even find this place through the haze. A man pushes past you muttering apologies in an accent you can't place. Maybe Irish, maybe Polish, and you realize how the city has become a collection of exiles who built Babel all over again. Everyone shouting, no one fully understanding. It's chaos, but it's living chaos, and there's something intoxicating about that. You wipe your sleeve across your mouth, the soot leaving a line like war paint, and for a fleeting moment you feel proud, like this grime is a badge of existence. The open scholarly debate swirls in your head. Did urbanization truly improve living standards, or merely redefine poverty in more crowded spaces? You look at the tenement windows glowing like lanterns and decide it's both. The crowd thickens again as you reach the market square, where steam engines hiss beside vegetable stalls and men in bowler hats debate politics as if shouting can rearrange the world. A pickpocket bumps into you, leaves with nothing, and disappears. It's almost flattering. Even thieves have standards. Somewhere nearby, a boy plays a tune on a penny whistle, something soft and haunting that manages to rise above the noise for just a moment. You pause, closing your eyes. In that brief hush, you imagine you're breathing country air again, fields instead of furnaces, but the fantasy collapses when a wagon wheel hits a puddle beside you, splashing your boots. The smell of smoke and humanity rushes back. You open your eyes to see a poster nailed to a wall. Clean Air Bill proposed, progress for all. You chuckle under your breath. The irony is that it's printed in ink, blackened by coal. Somewhere up the street, a man hawks newspapers with the headline, Modern Age Dawns, and you can't help muttering, so does asthma. The city hums around you like an enormous machine made of humans, and though you know you should leave, you stay rooted there, listening to its rhythm, the scrape, the chatter, the faint laughter buried inside the chaos. Crowded streets, empty air, but full hearts. You breathe in again despite yourself, coughing once, smiling after you're alive, and somehow, impossibly, that feels like victory. You wake before dawn again. The thin light barely strong enough to find your shoes on the floorboards, and already the mill whistle is moaning like an impatient ghost. You join the slow procession of women through the fog, shawls pulled tight, faces pale and unreadable, hands tucked in pockets not for warmth but to protect the skin that must work another 12 hours. The factory door opens with its familiar hiss, and you walk into the sound, the kind that gets into your bones and never leaves. The rows of looms stretch farther than you can see, their motion hypnotic, the clatter and snap forming a rhythm that replaces thought. You glance around and realize the men are fewer here. The women have taken over, their movements so precise they look choreographed. You find your place and begin, feet tapping the pedals, arms moving in instinctive time, and for a moment you almost forget yourself, swallowed by the noise. There's a sort of grace in it, a terrible kind of grace, a mainstream historical fact. By the mid-19th century, in many textile mills across Britain and New England, women made up nearly 70% of the workforce, paid half the male wage for double the precision. You think of that often, how society called you fragile but built its fortune on your endurance. The foreman walks the rows with his cane tapping lightly, not cruelly but constantly, a reminder of authority. The walls drip with condensation. The windows are steamed over so the daylight arrives only as a dim suggestion. You remember someone saying once that women were better suited for textile work because their fingers were delicate and small. You smirk, because those same delicate fingers can thread a needle faster than most men can light a pipe. You can smell the oil that coats every moving part, a heavy, metallic sweetness that sticks in your throat. It's easy to see why the city smells the way it does. It's exhaled breath from places like this. Someone near you sneezes and laughs. A quick burst of humanity swallowed by the machine. Across the aisle, two girls whisper between the clacks, gossip woven seamlessly into labor. A wedding, a scandal, a new recipe for keeping soot from staining collars. You think it's funny that people still dream in a place designed to erase individuality. Then the loom jams an awful metallic cough and the woman next to you reaches in with practiced calm to fix it before it can catch fire. Her sleeve brushes the gears dangerously close. She doesn't flinch. You realize she's done this 1,000 times and likely will another 1,000, because habit is stronger than fear. A fringe tidbit floats into your head. In some mills, women tied their hair back with bits of machine grease because ribbons caught in the gears. The grease held better than any bow. It's both ingenious and horrifying. Like everything in this century. You wipe sweat from your forehead, surprised by how warm it's gotten already, though it's not even midday. The heat here doesn't feel like sunlight. It's mechanical, artificial, an imitation of life. You start to wonder if the machines have personalities, if each one hums differently depending on who's tending it. Your loom sounds almost musical to you, a low rhythmic drone like a lullaby for the damned. The open scholarly debate circles your thoughts. Were the factory's instruments of female independence, or just new cages with softer locks? You don't know. You've heard of women in other cities, Lowell, Manchester, Leeds, writing letters, forming unions, even striking. Brave, stubborn, tired souls who dared to question the clock. You can't decide if they're heroes or just too exhausted to be afraid. You look at your hands again, the fingertips shiny from friction, calloused and oddly elegant. They've made more fabric than any noblewoman will ever wear. The irony makes you grin. You imagine one of your shawls wrapped around someone at a grand ball, the silk brushing over perfume and champagne, never realizing it came from these blistered hands. That thought makes you laugh. Softly, maybe a little bitterly, but still, you feel the absurd pride that comes from knowing the world's luxury runs on your fatigue. You think of your mother, who worked the same mill and told you once that fabric remembers its maker, that every thread holds a bit of someone's soul. You like that idea, even if it's nonsense. It makes you feel less like a cog. When the midday whistle blows, you step outside into the gray courtyard and stretch, your back cracking like old wood. The sky looks different out here. Not freer, just wider. Pigeons scatter as a delivery cart rolls by, and you catch your reflection in a puddle. Soot-smudged cheeks, hair escaping from your scarf, eyes still bright. For a moment you see strength instead of struggle. Around you, other women are laughing, sharing bread, trading jokes about the foreman's mustache or the new preacher's crooked teeth. The laughter spreads like light through smoke, and you realize it's the most beautiful sound in the world. You take a deep breath, not because the air's clean, but because it's yours for now. You close your eyes, let the city hum around you, and imagine the looms singing your story back long after you're gone. You spot them before you hear them. Barefoot figures darting between wagons, trousers rolled, eyes bright with that strange mix of fear and energy that only children in factory towns seem to carry. They move like ghosts of speed and routine, slipping through alleys, squeezing into doorways, always one shout away from punishment. You follow a few of them through the narrow gate of the cotton mill, and suddenly it hits you. The smell of hot oil, wet wool and metal that never cools. The children disappear into the noise, each taking their place beside a monstrous machine that's taller than any of them. One boy no older than 10 wrings a cloth with mechanical precision, his hands red from the cold water. Another crawls under a loom to retrieve fallen thread spools before the gears catch him. A girl with soot-streaked cheeks ties yarn knots so fast her fingers blur. She might as well be part of the machinery itself. The foreman watches, stopwatch in hand, eyes darting like a metronome. You wonder if he realizes these kids will never have the childhoods they deserve, or if that thought even exists in this century. A mainstream historical fact, by the 1840s, nearly 1 in 5 factory workers in Britain were children under 14, working 12-hour shifts for a fraction of an adult's pay. You look at them and feel something twisted inside you. They laugh occasionally, but it's a laugh without rest behind it, the sound of survival dressed up as joy. You hear one boy whisper to another, "We're faster than grown-ups." And technically he's right. Small bodies fit neatly under gears and through gaps adults can't reach. The machines need them more than the world admits. A fringe tidbit slides through your thoughts. Some mills issued tiny wooden tokens to children instead of coins, redeemable only at the factory's own store. Imagine getting paid in the same system that starves you. You want to say something, to shout maybe, but no one here has time for outrage. The machines drown everything. A child sneezes beside you, the sound lost under the loom's thunder. You notice a rag doll tucked on a shelf near one of the spinning frames, its fabric face blackened with lint. Someone brings a piece of childhood to work, a talisman against exhaustion. You think it's the saddest, bravest thing you've ever seen. You bend closer to the noise and realize how it vibrates in your chest, constant, unbroken. A heartbeat without rest. The children don't flinch anymore. Their bodies have learned to move within it. You watch one little girl blink as a thread snaps near her ear, leaving a faint red line on her cheek. She doesn't even pause. Somewhere behind her, a window rattles in its frame, and for half a second the light hits her hair just right. It looks gold, radiant even in this hell of motion. You think maybe beauty's rebellion is just persistence. The open, scholarly debate drifts through your mind like dust. Did industrial child labor fuel progress or reveal civilization's hypocrisy? You suspect both. Without these children, the empire's fabric would have frayed. Without their labor, the world's comfort would have come slower. But watching them now, that progress feels hollow. A bell clangs for lunch, and they spill out into the yard, still running, still loud, like they're trying to make up for lost time. One boy pulls a crust of bread from his pocket and shares it with a smaller girl. They laugh about something, probably nonsense, and for a moment the world feels less cruel. You sit on a barrel, watching their energy erupt across the courtyard. A group of them play a game with pebbles, inventing rules on the spot. You realize they're not just surviving, they're improvising, turning monotony into movement, pain into play. That's the genius of children. They refuse to stop creating, even when creation is rationed. You remember reading once that reformers argued children learn discipline in factories, as if obedience were the highest form of education. You look at the dirt-streaked faces around you and want to laugh. They're learning, yes, but not obedience. They're learning endurance, adaptability, and how to steal joy from impossible places. One small boy, maybe 7, looks up at the smoking chimneys and says, "It looks like the sky's working too." You almost answer, "It is," but you don't want to break the spell. When the whistle blows again, they march back inside, smaller shadows swallowed by a larger one. The last child turns back and waves at you, just once. You wave too, then stand there alone as the noise swells again, the city's endless heartbeat resuming. You can't tell whether you're more haunted by their labor or their laughter. Maybe both. The smoke thickens around you, the air dense with heat and history, and you whisper to no one, "We built the modern world on tiny shoulders." Then, because irony seems to be the only air left to breathe, you laugh softly. The sound vanishes into the fog before it can echo. The factory's whistle fades into the fog, and for the first time all day, silence feels possible, except it isn't. The city doesn't stop when the machines do, it only changes key. You step into the street just as dusk swallows the last traces of daylight, and the lamps flicker to life one by one. Little amber eyes set in iron throats. The air cools, thickening around the gaslights, turning every breath into something tangible. You hear the steady click of a night watchman's boots before you see him, long coat brushing the ground, lantern swinging like a tired planet orbiting his gloved hand. He nods at you without expression, then moves on, vanishing into the mist. You follow his echo down the narrow lane, and you realize that the city after dark is another creature entirely. Quieter. Yes, but no less alive. The noise of labor has given way to the murmur of survival. Doors creak open, and people emerge from shadowed homes to exchange gossip or trade leftovers. Children dart barefoot between puddles. Somewhere far off, a drunk man sings a hymn with surprising sincerity, and someone else laughs too hard in response. You can smell the breweries now, sweet yeast rising through the soot, colliding with the sharp tang of tanneries. It's disgusting and delicious at once, the scent of work and reward mingling. A mainstream historical fact surfaces through the haze. In 1807, London installed its first gas streetlights, and within decades, cities across Europe and America followed suit, transforming night from a thing to fear into a theater of activity. You watch the lamps flicker uncertainly, and imagine the awe they must have inspired the first time they burned. How people must have gathered just to stare at this captured fire that promised safety and spectacle. But as with everything here, light has its price. The gas hisses faintly, and your eyes sting. You pass an alley where the shadows cling a little too tightly. A rat scurries by carrying something that might once have been bread, and the sight makes you oddly comforted. At least someone's eating. You turn a corner and stumble upon a group of night workers, chimney sweeps and dock hands, sharing a jug of something strong. They look at you, half curious, half daring. One of them jokes that the city never sleeps because it can't afford to. Everyone laughs, but it's the kind of laughter that ends too fast. You lean against a lamppost, feeling its warmth radiate faintly, and realize that night here isn't rest, it's an intermission. Somewhere above, in the higher districts, the wealthy dine by candlelight, their world perfumed and polished. Down here, the same flame burns only to keep rats at bay. Still, you sense an odd intimacy in the darkness. The city after dark becomes honest. Without daylight's pretense, people drop their masks. Lovers meet behind warehouses. A policeman smokes beside the church steps pretending not to see them, and a boy runs errands between taverns like an unofficial postman for secrets. The fringe tidbit that floats into your thoughts makes you grin. In Victorian London, lamplighters often earned extra wages as informal night guards or gossip couriers, selling tidbits of overheard scandal to newspapers. You picture them like urban fireflies, carrying stories as much as light. The watchman passes again, tapping his stick against the stones. Once, twice, pause. The rhythm feels ritualistic, like a spell to keep the dark at bay. He catches your gaze and murmurs, "All's well," though both of you know it isn't. You nod anyway. Lies are part of the city's lullaby. The fog thickens now, curling around your boots like smoke from an invisible fire. The lamps glow haloed and soft, each circle of light a small island of comfort in an ocean of gray. You notice how every face looks gentler in this dimness, as though exhaustion itself becomes beautiful when blurred. A woman in a shawl sells roasted chestnuts from a cart, and you buy one mostly for the warmth it offers your hands. The taste is sweet, smoky, and faintly metallic, the flavor of the century condensed into a single bite. Across the street, someone plays a violin, not well, but passionately. The tune wobbles, then steadies, filling the air with melancholy so tangible it feels like mist has learned to sing. You think about the open scholarly debate. Did the advent of artificial light truly make urban life safer, or did it simply expand the hours people could be exploited? You look around at faces still working, still moving, long past sunset, and suspect the latter. Yet there's also freedom in this illuminated night, a space for conversation, mischief, love. You watch two silhouettes meet beneath a flickering lamp, their hands brushing, then separating as footsteps approach. That tiny gesture, fleeting, secret, feels like rebellion. The watchman taps his stick again. The rhythm fades into distance. Midnight approaches. The fog begins to lift, and the city exhales. You walk slowly, matching its pace, feeling the pulse of this sleepless organism. Somewhere behind you, a baby cries, a dog barks, a door slams, proof that life continues even when unseen. You stop at the bridge, staring at the river below, its surface reflecting every lamp like scattered stars. For a second, you can almost believe the city is dreaming, softly, mechanically, but dreaming nonetheless. You breathe in, the air still bitter with coal, and whisper to the night, "You never rest, do you?" The wind doesn't answer, but the lamps flicker once, as if amused. You wake with the scent already clinging to you, as if it seeped into your dreams overnight. A dense, unmistakable cocktail of smoke, sewage, and something faintly sweet that you can't name but recognize instantly. It's the smell of the city, the official perfume of modernity, and no one seems immune to it anymore. You step outside, and it greets you like an old friend with questionable hygiene. The street is still damp from a night of mist and chimney soot, and every cobblestone glistens under a grayish morning light. You take a breath and cough, because that's what everyone does first thing here. Breathe, regret, repeat. The baker's shop 2 doors down has already started up its ovens, and the warm scent of bread fights bravely against the tide of smoke rolling from the factories. For a moment, the combination charred air and fresh crust smells almost poetic, until a horse cart passes by and adds its contribution to the mix. You laugh under your breath. Civilization, it seems, is just nature rebranded with worse air. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. By the late 19th century, cities like Manchester and Pittsburgh were so cloaked in coal smoke that residents reported forgetting what color the sky truly was. Progress, newspapers called it, as if visibility were an outdated luxury. You walk farther, boots sticking faintly in the muck that never quite dries, and the odor changes again. Less industrial, more biological. A sewer vent sighs beside you, exhaling something so vile it could strip paint, and you swear the air itself winces. And yet life goes on. A butcher sharpens his knives beside a drain. A florist arranges bouquets of violets and lilies right next to an overflowing gutter. Somehow, the stench doesn't cancel beauty, it frames it. People in this city have developed a sixth sense for ignoring what would horrify their ancestors. You pass a small group of women scrubbing their doorsteps with boiling water and lye, their faces determined. One looks up and says, "Can't fight the stink, love, but at least we won't add to it." You smile, nod, and nearly trip over a stray cat emerging triumphantly from a garbage heap. The cat looks unbothered, glowing with urban arrogance. A fringe tidbit surfaces. During the height of the Great Stink in London in 1858, Parliament itself nearly shut down because the smell of the Thames was so overpowering, prompting the hasty modernization of the city's sewers. You imagine those fine gentlemen fleeing their marble halls while pretending it was all dignified. Progress has a sense of humor. You reach the marketplace and find the smell there has evolved again. Fish, onions, coal, sweat, horse leather, and something sugary from a nearby stall selling pastries dusted in soot like unintentional seasoning. It's absurdly alive, this odor. It hums with contradiction. You can almost trace the map of the city through your nose. Each district has its own signature note. The metallic tang near the foundries, the vinegar drift from the dye works, the comforting yeast of the bakeries, the faint ghost of lilac from laundry soap. Together they form an orchestra of decay and persistence. You remember hearing a preacher once call it the scent of ambition, and you laughed then, but now you almost agree. There's something honest about it, an unfiltered reminder that progress isn't sterile. It's sweaty, smelly, human. You pause to watch a street cleaner push his cart, tossing lime powder onto puddles of waste. He whistles while he works, maybe to keep from noticing the obvious. Overhead, smoke billows from 1,000 chimneys, twisting into shapes that briefly resemble clouds before dissolving. The city has its own weather now, manufactured daily and inhaled hourly. The open scholarly debate echoes in your thoughts. Did industrial urban life desensitize people or simply redefine what normal meant? You suspect both. You step into a small apothecary just to escape the street, and the sharp scent of camphor, lavender, and soap nearly knocks you back. The shopkeeper grins proudly. "Smells clean, doesn't it?" he says, and you nod, though the contrast almost hurts. He sells bottled perfumes promising mountain freshness and seaside air, none of which anyone in this neighborhood has ever experienced. You buy one anyway, knowing it's a lie but enjoying the idea of pretending. When you step back outside, you uncap it and dab a little behind your ear, the scent immediately swallowed by coal smoke. You laugh again, softer this time. The futility is endearing. The city's orchestra resumes its performance. Wheels grinding, people shouting, gulls screaming overhead, and for the first time the smell doesn't seem like an assault but a declaration: this is life, unperfumed and unstoppable. You take one more deep breath, not out of masochism but defiance, and whisper, "Well, progress, you stink beautifully." The bell stops ringing, the machines fall silent, and for a strange delicate moment you hear nothing but your own heartbeat. Then, slowly, another kind of rhythm begins, a hesitant laughter, a shuffle of feet, the sound of lives trying to remember what to do when they're not being timed. The city has just invented something dangerous: free time. You step outside the mill and watch as workers spill into the streets like freed currents, uncertain whether to celebrate or collapse. Some head for the pub, some for the park, others just lean against walls, staring at nothing as if waiting for instructions. You realize how new this is, how few people in history have ever had a moment that wasn't tied to survival or service. It feels like rebellion, though no one has quite named it yet. A mainstream historical fact floats to mind. By the 1850s, labor reformers in Britain and America were campaigning for the Saturday half-holiday, arguing that shorter hours would make workers more productive. It was the birth of the weekend, though most people just spent it sleeping or mending clothes. You follow a group of women heading toward the riverbank, laughing too loudly for the hour. One carries a basket of bread, another hums a hymn turned into a drinking tune, and together they sound like joy learning how to walk again. The air still stinks of coal and tannery waste, but it also smells faintly of freedom, raw, unpolished, and a little unsure of itself. You sit on a bench beside a man in a soot-streaked waistcoat who's sketching something on a scrap of paper. He looks up, grins, and says, "A machine for doing nothing." You laugh, thinking he's joking, but the drawing shows gears turning themselves endlessly, creating motion with no purpose. "That's leisure," he adds, "industry without guilt." You don't know whether to applaud or worry. A fringe tidbit surfaces. In Victorian England, moralists fretted that too much leisure would lead to degeneracy of the mind, prompting factories to fund rational recreation clubs, bowling leagues, choirs, and chess societies designed to keep pleasure safe, supervised, and sober. You imagine a committee deciding how fun should look, and it's both absurd and charming. Across the street, the new municipal park shimmers behind iron gates, rows of tidy trees, a bandstand, a lake so still it looks painted. You wander in, and suddenly the noise of the city recedes, replaced by the hum of conversation and the distant toot of a brass band warming up. Families walk arm in arm. Young couples pretend not to notice each other. Children chase pigeons with fierce concentration. It feels like an experiment in collective relaxation. You find a seat near the fountain and realize that even here people move by habit, slow, measured, as if waiting for someone to ring a bell. Then, without warning, a gust of wind sends spray across the crowd, and everyone laughs. For a moment, no one remembers their station, their shifts, their debts, just laughter. You breathe it in like medicine. The open scholarly debate floats through your thoughts. Did industrialization give birth to modern leisure, or simply package exhaustion as recreation? You watch a young man napping under a tree, his lunch pail beside him, and decide it doesn't matter. Whatever this is, rest, boredom, rebellion, it's human. A group of boys start playing football with a bundle of rags, kicking it between tree roots until a constable yells at them to stop. They run, laughing harder. Somewhere nearby, a woman reads aloud from a newspaper to her friends, stumbling over long words but savoring them like dessert. They say Paris has cafes where people sit for hours doing nothing. She exclaims, half disbelieving, half dreaming. You grin. The idea itself sounds decadent, almost sinful. A small brass band starts playing a waltz by Strauss, and the melody drifts lazily over the park. You think of the workers who must have built this place, laying every brick after a 14-hour shift, and wonder if they ever got to sit here themselves. Probably not, but maybe that's what progress is, a gift handed upward, one exhausted generation at a time. You notice how the sunlight catches on the fountain's spray, turning water into momentary gold. People stop to watch, quiet for once, and you realize they're witnessing something radical, beauty without purpose. You close your eyes and feel the faint breeze across your face, carrying the mixed scents of grass, smoke, and pastry. The city hums beyond the park walls, impatient, but here time moves differently, slower, almost kind. You think maybe this is how revolutions start, not with speeches or guns, but with an afternoon off. You stretch your legs, sigh, and whisper to the air. So this is what doing nothing feels like. The air doesn't answer, but it smells faintly of lilacs from somewhere nearby, and for the first time in days the wind feels clean. When the week finally exhales and the mills go dark, the city shifts key again from the mechanical grind of gears to the offbeat rhythm of fiddles, whistles, and laughter echoing off the wet cobblestones. You follow the sound, because everyone does eventually, to the place where exhaustion goes to dress up as joy, the music hall. Outside, gas lights flicker against posters promising comic geniuses, daring singers, and one-man orchestras, all plastered over yesterday's political announcements. The doorman looks half asleep and fully unimpressed. He waves you through with a grunt. Inside, the air is thick enough to chew. Tobacco smoke, spilled beer, cheap perfume, and something sticky that used to be hope. A pianist thunders through the opening chords. The crowd roars, and just like that, you forget you're tired. You slide into a wooden seat beside a group of women still in their work dresses, hair hastily pinned, cheeks glowing with defiance. They clap too loud, laugh too easily, and it's perfect. On stage, a singer in a crimson gown belts out a song about love and laundry, rhyming heartache with handbrake, and somehow making it work. You find yourself laughing, not because it's funny exactly, but because it's allowed. A mainstream historical fact bubbles up. By the 1880s, London alone had over 300 music halls, each one packed nightly with factory workers, sailors, servants, and clerks, all united by the sacred ritual of cheap entertainment. Respectable society sneered at them, of course. Anything that smelled this alive must be sinful, but the tickets sold faster than sermons. You glance toward the balcony, where a few top-hatted gentlemen whisper to each other, pretending they're only here for the anthropological experience. Below, the crowd knows better. The line between performer and audience blurs. Everyone's part of the act. Someone shouts a joke, someone else tosses a peanut, and for once chaos feels kind. You sip something that calls itself beer but tastes like bread in morning, and it still hits just right. The pianist wipes sweat from his brow, then winks at you mid-song, as if to say, "We're all in on the same joke tonight." The stage lights flare, revealing the next act, a magician who looks like he'd lose a fight with his own cape. He pulls a rabbit out of a hat that clearly contained two, and the audience applauds anyway, half in mockery, half in mercy. Behind you, someone starts a chant, then a sing-along, and suddenly 200 strangers are harmonizing through a haze of smoke and ale. It's not pretty, but it's sincere. You realize this collective noise is the city's heartbeat after hours. A fringe tidbit tickles your mind. Some historians claim that the bawdiest songs from these halls eventually inspired early labor anthems, their melodies rewritten to fit protest lyrics. Imagine revolutions born out of punchlines. A waiter stumbles by, spilling gin on your sleeve, and apologizes in a thick accent you can't quite place. You wave it off. Nobody here stays dry for long. At the far end of the room, a woman in feathers climbs onto a table to dance, scandalously showing her ankles. The crowd gasps, then cheers. The boundaries of decency are as elastic as her stockings. Someone behind you mutters, "The angels are taking notes," and you laugh because if heaven's watching, it's probably jealous. The open scholarly debate hums in your head. Did the rise of mass entertainment liberate the working class or distract them from revolution? You look around at faces flushed with laughter and think, maybe both. The city learned how to sing, but only after it learned how to suffer. The applause grows louder, the beer warmer, the songs dirtier. The laughter becomes contagious, the kind that leaves your ribs aching and your soul oddly lighter. You think of the preacher from last week warning about idle amusements, and you wish he could see this people too poor for rest, buying joy by the pint, and finding communion in the absurd. As the night stretches, the hall grows hazy and intimate. Someone starts telling ghost stories between acts. Someone else falls asleep mid-cheer. Outside, the fog presses against the windows, but no one inside notices. The final act takes the stage. A young woman with a banjo and a voice that could melt iron. She sings of the river, of hunger, of loving someone you'll never afford, and somehow the entire room goes quiet. Her last note trembles, then breaks, and for a moment the city itself seems to hold its breath. Then thunderous applause. You join in until your hands sting. When the lights finally dim and people start shuffling out, you step into the cold air and realize it's nearly dawn. The streets are still alive, humming with leftover laughter and distant echoes of piano keys. You smile to yourself, the scent of smoke and gin tangled in your coat, and whisper, "Good night, progress, you party well for something that never sleeps." You pass a grocer's boy balancing a crate of apples on his head, his bare feet slipping in the gutter. A gentleman in a top hat frowns at him for existing too loudly. You think about how class here isn't just money, it's choreography. The rich move vertically, the poor horizontally. They build up while you spread out. A mainstream historical fact lands in your thoughts like a coin in a jar. By the late 19th century, urban planners in London and Paris began physically separating classes through zoning, pushing the working poor into industrial quarters and reserving the center for elegance. You can feel it even now. The invisible wall you keep crossing without permission. On the upper side, gas lamps are cleaned every morning. On the lower, they're left to die slowly, coughing light. Laundry lines stretch like surrender flags between tenement windows. Somewhere above, someone plays piano behind lace curtains, and for a fleeting second you can almost believe both worlds share the same music, until a wagon hits a pothole and the illusion snaps. You walk past a charity school with a painted sign reading "For the improvement of the deserving poor." You wonder who decides who deserves what. The teacher, a thin man with eyes too kind for his own good, is explaining geography to children who've never seen the countryside. You hear him say, "Every nation has its boundaries," and you think, so does every street. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Some 19th century social reformers in Manchester paid workers small stipends just to bathe once a week, convinced cleanliness could cure poverty. They called it moral hygiene. You imagine inspectors sniffing at people like overripe fruit, nodding in approval or disgust. Civilization's idea of empathy seems to come with a checklist. The further you walk, the more the city exposes its underlayers. Streets that narrow like throats, doorways that open into darkness. You glimpse a woman washing her baby in a tin basin beside an open sewer, humming softly to drown the smell. Across the way, a coachman flicks mud from his wheels, cursing the filth of the lower streets, not realizing he's splattering the same mud on his own cuffs. Everyone here is pretending something isn't their fault. You stop at a corner where two men argue, one in a threadbare coat, one in velvet. Their voices rise like rival choirs. The velvet man insists, "The poor are poor because they lack character." The other replies, "Then lend me yours." You almost applaud. The open scholarly debate floats into your head. Did industrial capitalism truly offer social mobility, or merely disguise hierarchy with the illusion of effort? You look at your hands, soot-blackened from touching a railing, and think the answer's right there in your palms. The afternoon sun tries to break through the haze, glinting briefly off rooftops before retreating behind smoke. You wander into a small public square where street performers juggle, sing, and pick pockets all at once. A man in rags recites Shakespeare from memory, his voice echoing with eerie beauty. A passing gentleman tosses him a coin without looking, as if paying for silence rather than art. You sit on a bench, surrounded by contradictions too numerous to count. Silk and sweat, piety and gin, kindness and contempt. Cities are symphonies of inequality, you think, and everyone plays their part on cue. A child runs by with a chalk stub and draws a hopscotch grid across the street. You smile when you notice she's drawn it right over a carriage rut, a small act of rebellion. Behind her a constable scowls, but he doesn't stop her. Maybe even he's tired of enforcing the obvious. You realize the cobblestones here, chipped, uneven, stained, might be the most honest historians of all. They've seen everyone. The banker, the beggar, the reformer, the thief. The city writes its history not in books but in footsteps. You take one last walk through the narrowest alley where laundry flaps above like the sails of invisible ships. You breathe deeply, catching both perfume and sewage in the same lungful, and think, this is civilization, glorious, grotesque, indivisible. You keep walking, because there's no direction that isn't someone else's story. The city wakes again, and for a moment, you mistake the rising smoke for prayer. The chimneys stretch like steeples, their black breath curling toward a heaven that probably moved out years ago. Bells ring somewhere, church bells, factory bells, all indistinguishable now, and you wonder if anyone still remembers which calls the soul and which calls the shift. The sky is an iron lid beneath it humanity hums, both worshipping and welding its way into modernity. You wander past a church wedged between warehouses, its stone facade darkened by soot but still stubbornly standing. Inside, the pews are half empty, yet the air is thick with murmured devotion. Outside, the street is full. It seems belief has relocated from altar to engine. You pause to watch a group of men hauling metal beams toward a construction site, their movements measured and precise, like a congregation rehearsing ritual. Sparks fly from the blacksmith's anvil across the lane, tiny, fleeting halos. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. In the mid-19th century, as industry surged, church attendance across Britain began to decline, leading reformers to warn that the machine had become the new cathedral. You think they weren't wrong. The rhythm of the city feels religious, structured, repetitive, absolute, and maybe you decide, it's not the loss of faith that's happened, but a change of deity. A clergyman steps out of the church and nods to you, his collar gleaming white against the soot. He looks weary, as though salvation has become another kind of shift work. God's in the details, he says, gesturing to the factory skyline. He has to be, doesn't he? You want to answer, but a passing steam cart drowns you out with a hiss like divine punctuation. You smile instead. A fringe tidbit surfaces from memory. Some early industrialists genuinely believed they were doing God's work by mechanizing labor, arguing that machines disciplined mankind's sinful laziness. You look at your own calloused hands and wonder if blisters count as beatitudes. The street smells of hot iron, wet stone, and something faintly holy ozone, perhaps from the new electric telegraph lines that hum overhead. They're like modern rosary beads strung across rooftops, carrying messages faster than prayer ever could. You can almost hear the city whispering in binary tongues. The open scholarly debate floats to you again. Did industrialization secularize society or simply relocate its sacred spaces? You look at a crowd kneeling in front of a machine shop, not in reverence but in repair, and think maybe both. Faith hasn't vanished. It's adapted. The gospel now runs on steam. You find yourself drawn toward the construction site at the edge of the square, where a new bridge is being built entirely of iron. Workers balance high above the water, hammering rhythmically, their silhouettes black against the pale sky. There's something transcendent about it, a man-made miracle rising from mud. The foreman wipes his brow and grins proudly. "It'll outlast us all," he says. You nod, though you're not sure if that's comfort or curse. Beneath the bridge, the river runs thick and slow, carrying the city's reflection in waves of distortion. You catch sight of a small chapel perched on the opposite bank, half submerged by fog. For a second, the bridge and the chapel align perfectly in your view. Faith and function in the same frame. It feels like an accident with meaning. As the day wanes, you step back inside the church for shelter. The organ wheezes faintly, competing with the rumble of distant machines. You kneel, not because you believe, but because it's the only position that feels honest. Your hands smell faintly of oil and ash. You clasp them anyway. A woman beside you prays out loud, her words half sob, half lullaby. "Lord," she whispers, "grant us rest." You think she might mean sleep, or maybe just a day without noise. When you rise, the light through the stained glass has dimmed to rust and gold, the colors of machinery at sunset. You step back outside and feel the city vibrating under your feet, alive with its strange mechanical faith. The whistle of a far-off train cuts through the air like a psalm, and you find yourself smiling. The world has built a new religion, one of motion, invention, and endurance. Its saints wear soot, its hymns are whistles, and its miracles arrive on schedule. You walk on, the glow of the furnaces lighting your way like candle flames. And for once, the smoke smells almost like incense. It hits you before you see it. The kind of smell that doesn't merely enter your nose but rearranges your thoughts. You stop mid-step, unsure whether to laugh or faint. The summer has been merciless, and the river, poor, overworked, endlessly abused, has finally decided to fight back. What was once the city's liquid spine has turned into its open wound. You walk closer anyway, because curiosity always wins over common sense, and the stench thickens until it feels like you're swimming in it. The water glows faintly brown under the noon sun, bubbling like something alive. Even the gulls refuse to land. A man selling lemonade nearby fans himself with a newspaper, muttering, "Can't drown in this river anymore, too solid." You glance around and see the city's grand facades quivering in the heat. Ladies in lace gloves clutch scented handkerchiefs to their faces, men wrap their noses in silk scarves, and still the odor finds them. It's democratic in its cruelty, no class exemption, no privilege of air. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your haze of nausea. In the summer of 1858, London's Great Stink became so unbearable that Parliament suspended sessions and soaked its curtains in chloride of lime. You picture the most powerful men in the empire gagging behind perfumed drapery and can't help but grin. The river, ignored for centuries, has finally gotten the last word. You lean on the bridge rail, and the wood is sticky with something you'd rather not identify. Below, an old barge slides past, carrying waste to nowhere, its oarsmen whistling like they're afraid to stop breathing. The stench is so total that it seems to hum, vibrating against your skin like invisible heat. Somewhere behind you, A preacher shouts that this is divine punishment for man's vanity. You half agree. Then again, maybe it's just bad plumbing. A fringe tidbit surfaces. Perfume merchants reported record profits that year, and one even advertised a scent called Thames Number 5. You laugh out loud, then gag immediately. A tragic combination. You stagger away from the bridge, through streets that shimmer with heat and rumor. Everyone's talking about it. The smell, the sickness, the engineers who promise salvation through science. You overhear one man say, "Mr. Bazalgette will pipe us out of purgatory." You file the name away, knowing he'll probably succeed. Civilizations, after all, are just plumbing projects waiting for funding. Children run barefoot through puddles that bubble suspiciously, and you silently salute their courage or ignorance. Shops sell vinegar-soaked sponges to hold under your nose, but they're useless within minutes. The whole city smells like a compost pile of ambition and regret. As night falls, the air cools slightly, but the odor clings, heavier now, more intimate. You walk past the cathedral, its stone walls streaked black with soot, and notice candles burning on every step, an improvised vigil for clean air. People whisper prayers to no one in particular. The open scholarly debate circles your head. Was the Great Stink the true catalyst of modern sanitation, or just a public embarrassment too large to ignore? Either way, you think progress has a sense of humor. It arrives through disgust. Near midnight, the river catches a reflection of the gaslights, and for the first time all day, it almost looks beautiful. Ripples shimmer like molten bronze, deceptive but mesmerizing. You breathe through your mouth, which helps only slightly, and feel an odd affection for this terrible scene. There's something pure in its honesty. The city can't hide its waste anymore. It's laid bare, steaming under the stars. You imagine the future. Pipes buried deep, clean water flowing silently beneath polished streets, and wonder if they'll remember this summer when the river became both villain and savior. You hope they do. A breeze finally drifts in from the west, faint but real. It doesn't smell good, just better. The crowd on the bridge exhales in unison, a choir of relief. You close your eyes, letting the air pass over you, and whisper to the city. You had to choke before you learned to breathe. The lamps flicker, the river murmurs, and somewhere, deep beneath your feet, you swear you can already hear the faint, hopeful rumble of pipes being laid. The city has learned to burn politely now, not that it's stopped catching fire. It simply does so with better paperwork. You walk through the morning haze and hear the clatter of hooves, the whistle of a constable's baton slicing air, and the faint crackle of a training fire brigade testing its hoses by the river. The smell of yesterday's soot lingers, half pride, half warning. For the first time in history, order is something you can see. Men in uniforms, their brass buttons gleaming, their boots synchronized like drumbeats of civility. You realize that progress has begun dressing itself, discipline tailored in navy blue and polished leather. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. London's Metropolitan Police, founded in 1829, was the first modern organized force of its kind, followed by brigades and constabularies across Europe and America. To protect and serve, they said, though no one quite agreed on whom they were protecting or serving. You watch a constable pacing his beat, tapping his truncheon lightly against a lamppost in rhythm with his thoughts. He greets a milkman, nods to a group of women sweeping their stoops, and glares at a boy chalking rude words onto a wall. The boy erases them immediately, not from fear but from recognition. He knows the script of obedience by heart. You fall in step behind them, realizing that the city now moves to a new rhythm, not the chaos of survival, but the choreography of control. Fire brigades rumble past, their engines horse-drawn, their bells jangling with the excitement of impending danger. You catch a glimpse of them in motion, helmets flashing, coats swinging like knights of a secular crusade. A fringe tidbit flickers through your memory. Before professional fire services, London relied on rival insurance companies' brigades, each saving only the buildings that bore their logo. Imagine your house burning while men argue over which company's emblem is nailed to your wall. Civilization has always arrived half by heroism and half by billing. You turn a corner and find yourself in front of the new police station, an architectural sermon in stone, symmetrical, restrained, and faintly smug. Inside, men sit behind desks copying reports by lamplight, inventing bureaucracy as they go. You peek through the door and see one officer meticulously writing drunk and disorderly, fined 2 shillings, while another files a complaint about a missing hat. The open scholarly debate hums at the edge of your thoughts. Did the rise of public policing bring safety or simply replace community with surveillance? You're not sure, but the city certainly feels watched. The air has changed, still thick with soot, but now laced with the faint metallic scent of regulation. Outside, a commotion breaks the morning calm. A pickpocket caught by a pair of constables struggling as a small crowd gathers. The thief can't be more than 14. His face pale, his hands too thin to threaten anyone. One officer shouts about morality, the other about law. You notice how no one intervenes. Justice has become performance art. The boy is led away, still protesting that hunger isn't theft. You sigh. The city nods back, as if agreeing but too busy to care. Farther down the street, a fire alarm rings, shrill and insistent. You follow the sound to see smoke unfurling from a bakery roof, black ribbons against the morning gray. Within minutes, the brigade arrives, efficient and astonishingly calm. Buckets pass hand to hand, water arcs through sunlight, and the crowd cheers when the flames sputter out. The baker, covered in flour and gratitude, shakes hands with the fire captain. For a fleeting moment, you feel something like pride on behalf of humanity. The city can finally save itself from itself. As dusk falls, you sit on a bench near the police station and watch lamps being lit one by one. The streets are orderly now, almost serene. A patrol walks past, their lanterns swinging in time, their presence equal parts comfort and control. A drunk man sings in the distance, and instead of chaos there's laughter. You think maybe the city has found its balance. Not peace exactly, but an understanding that too much freedom burns, too much order suffocates, and survival lies somewhere in the smoke between them. You lean back, listening to the muffled rhythm of hooves, bells, and distant laughter, the heartbeat of a civilization trying to behave. You find yourself staring at a sack of potatoes in a shop window. Absurdly homesick, they're misshapen and dirty, but something about them, the rough texture, the smell of soil even through glass, pulls you backward to a field you barely remember. The city has been teaching you to forget that you were once made of earth, not brick dust. You walk without purpose now, through streets that feel both infinite and claustrophobic, until the noise fades just enough for memory to surface. You remember open sky, real sky, not this gray ceiling held up by chimneys. You remember the sound of crickets, the way twilight used to smell like hay and not like smoke. You didn't know it then, but that silence was wealth. Now, silence costs rent. You pass a newsstand selling illustrated papers. One headline reads, "The country is dead. Long live the city." The artist's sketch shows cheerful workers beside shining engines, as though steam has replaced sunrise. You almost laugh. A mainstream historical fact flickers through your thoughts. Between 1800 and 1900, Britain's rural population dropped by nearly half, while its urban population tripled, feeding the insatiable appetite of industrial labor. Millions traded fields for factories, songs for whistles. You are one of them, or would be, in this story. And though you've learned to walk in step with the machine, part of you still beats to the slower rhythm of wind and wheat. You cross a bridge where the water glows with the reflection of gaslights, and for a second it almost looks like a meadow at dusk, fireflies replaced by flickering lamps. The illusion hurts. You meet an old man selling baskets, his hands rough and strong, his accent thick as unfiltered cider. He tells you he came from the country before it forgot itself. His baskets are made from willow cut near the river, though he calls the water sick now. He says it with affection, not anger, like someone forgiving a relative for bad behavior. You buy a small basket you don't need, mostly to keep his story alive. A fringe tidbit drifts into your mind. Victorian reformers once sponsored Back to the Land movements, urging city dwellers to plant rooftop gardens and keep pigeons for sanity. You imagine these earnest souls watering ferns on soot-covered balconies, pretending the wind between buildings is a breeze through wheat. It's endearing and tragic at once. You walk past a park bench where a woman knits while watching her child play with a wooden horse, its wheels wobbling on the uneven path. The boy gallops it in circles, shouting, "Faster, faster," as though trying to summon real horses into existence. You can't help but smile. Childhood, at least, still believes in distance. The open scholarly debate hums at the edge of your awareness. Did industrial urbanization truly destroy rural culture, or did it simply transform nostalgia into a commodity? You look around at the paintings in shop windows. Pastoral landscapes, shepherds under eternal sunsets, cows cleaner than any cow that ever lived, and realize the city now buys the idea of the countryside by the frame. A field has become a luxury item. The more smoke a city breathes, the more it dreams of grass. You walk into a pub where the sign above the door reads, "The Plowman's Rest." Inside, the floorboards creak like old barn beams, and the smell of ale mingles with roasted onions. The patrons are mostly laborers, their laughter worn but genuine. A fiddler in the corner plays a tune so old it sounds like it's remembering itself as it goes. Someone starts to sing along, a folk melody about a woman waiting by a gate, her lover gone to the mills. The crowd joins in by instinct, their voices soft but steady. You realize none of them have seen a gate like that in years, but they sing it anyway, because memory is a kind of rebellion. When you leave, night has fallen. The sky is starless, the air thick, but the sound of the song follows you out, carried faintly through the alleyways. You clutch the basket you bought from the old man and imagine filling it with apples, wild flowers, maybe even air that doesn't taste like iron. The thought feels indulgent, almost criminal. You turn a corner and spot a small patch of weeds growing stubbornly between the cobblestones, tiny, defiant green. You kneel for a moment just to look at it, and under your breath you say, "You're brave, little field." Then you rise and keep walking. The city's hum surrounding you again, the ghost of grass still caught in your lungs. You realize the rural heart isn't gone, it's just buried, beating faintly under the pavement, waiting for a softer age to dig it up again. You wake to a hammer's echo bouncing down a boulevard that didn't exist 10 years ago. When you look up, the skyline has changed overnight again, as if the city keeps dreaming itself taller. Steel ribs rise where wooden bones once stood. Glass panes catch the pale morning light like trapped fragments of sky. And somewhere in the din, you can almost hear pride masquerading as progress. The smell of wet mortar mixes with the sweetness of sawdust, and you follow it until you find the source, a half-finished building that looks impossibly modern, arched, gleaming, daring. You watch a team of workers perched high above, silhouettes against the clouded sun, their hammers ticking in perfect time. It's a strange ballet of danger and ambition. The ground beneath your feet hums faintly. The city is learning how to inhale. A mainstream historical fact drifts up through the dust. In 1851, London's Crystal Palace stunned the world. A cathedral not of stone but of iron and glass, built to celebrate industry itself. People said sunlight had never looked so civilized. You imagine the awe, the blinding transparency of it all, the irony that a city once defined by soot now worships clarity. You pass by another site, a railway station under construction, arches wide enough to fit entire trains, roofs so high they almost seem to mock the clouds. Inside, scaffolding stretches like veins, ladders like bones, and you realize that buildings here are no longer built, they're grown. You stop to rest near a stonemason eating his lunch. He nods toward the skyscraping frame and mutters, "No breath in those things, just bones and mirrors." His words linger. He's right, in a way. The city is learning to breathe, but the air tastes metallic. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Some 19th century critics accused architects of iron fever, fearing that all this glass and steel would erase humanity's warmth. Others called it liberation. Finally, buildings that didn't pretend to be nature but competed with it. You tilt your head and catch your own reflection in a nearby pane of glass, distorted, fractured, multiplied. You think maybe they were both right. You wander into an older district where medieval stone still clings stubbornly beside modern facades. Here, gargoyles stare down at brick chimneys, the past glaring at the future. A woman sweeping her doorstep says, "They call it improvement, but I miss when buildings whispered instead of shouting." You nod. There's truth in her fatigue. Yet you can't help but admire the new structures. Their arrogance, their openness, they gleam even under the grime, as if convinced that beauty is worth enduring soot for. The open, scholarly debate hums in your head. Was industrial architecture an act of ego or of empathy? A way to house humanity better or just taller? You think of the new public libraries, vast and echoing, where working-class men and women sit beneath domed ceilings once reserved for nobility. You walk into one, and your footsteps multiply in the space. The smell of dust and ink is a kind of incense. A boy in a patched coat reads beneath a skylight so large it feels like a portal. You whisper to yourself, maybe this is what breathing looks like. Outside again, a soft rain begins to fall, tracing streaks down the glass facades until they shimmer like tears. The city doesn't repel the weather anymore. It participates in it. You walk past shop windows where mannequins stand beneath reflections of chimneys and cranes, and for a moment, the entire skyline looks like one elaborate illusion. But it's real. Every inch of it, built by hands that will never live in the rooms they create. You glance toward the horizon where a new bridge is rising, elegant and skeletal. It's beautiful, but its beauty is indifferent. As the light fades, you find shelter under a newly installed awning, iron ribs and glass skin, and watch the city pulse around you. Every window glows with lamplight, each a small lung exhaling warmth into the gray. You realize that architecture, like its makers, is just trying to survive the century by adapting its breath. You close your eyes, listening to the hammering fade into the rhythm of rain, and think that maybe someday, when the soot finally settles, this city will exhale cleanly. But for now, it's still learning how. You walk out into a Sunday morning washed in pale sunlight, and for the first time in months the air almost smells green. The park gates stand open, ornate iron vines curling above the arch like an invitation, and people pour through as if they've been waiting all week just to breathe somewhere that doesn't echo. Inside, the noise of the city fades into a polite murmur. Wheels rolling over gravel, children's shoes tapping along paths lined with benches, and the faint wet sigh of wind passing through new planted elms. You pause, not because the view is grand, it isn't, but because it feels like someone remembered the human body needs sky. The grass glistens, clipped too short, neat as a soldier's haircut. You step onto it anyway, scandalously, and feel the earth push faintly back through your soles. It's a quiet rebellion, walking without purpose. Around you, the park becomes a theater of civility. Clerks in Sunday coats pretending not to notice the ladies with parasols pretending not to notice them. Nannies pushing prams with faces so tired they could fall asleep standing. Old men arguing over pigeons as if they were matters of state. A brass band strikes up a march near the bandstand, off-key but enthusiastic, and the sound mingles with birdsong, which now competes for space in the human-made air. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. In 1847, the British Parliament passed the Public Health Act, which, among other miracles of plumbing, encouraged the creation of parks for the moral improvement of the working class. You smile, moral improvement by fresh air, as though grass were an antidote to despair. A fringe tidbit floats in next. When London's first great park, Victoria Park, opened in 1845, the crowds were so large that people fainted, not from awe, but because clean air after weeks of soot made them dizzy. You breathe deeply now, half hoping for the same effect. You sit by the pond, where sunlight glints off water like coins you'll never spend. A child drops crumbs for ducks, and his mother laughs a sound bright enough to slice through the gray. You imagine this scene as Progress's apology letter. Sorry for the smoke. Have a tree. The open scholarly debate hums softly. Did public parks genuinely democratize leisure or simply disguise poverty beneath landscaping? You don't know. The benches are free, but the houses beyond the gates still aren't. A man in a threadbare coat sits beside you, silently opening a newspaper to the classifieds. Nice day, you say. He nods without looking up. You notice the tremor in his hand, the ink stains on his fingers. When the wind picks up, the paper shakes harder, and you realize he's not reading, he's pretending, holding himself together by the act of normalcy. Around you, laughter continues. Someone opens a picnic basket that smells faintly of bread and pickles. Someone else sneezes, loudly, politely. It's all so proper, so contained. You wonder if the grass absorbs loneliness the way it drinks rain. You wander deeper into the park and find the artificial lake, a masterpiece of engineering disguised as nature. Swans glide past litter floating like punctuation. Lovers' rowboats, their reflections wobbling in the ripples, their laughter soft as the water itself. You pause at the bridge, leaning over the railing just to watch light move across the surface. For a second, you forget what century it is. The breeze brushes your face, and for the first time in days you feel unmeasured by clocks or quotas. But peace in the city is always temporary. Somewhere beyond the hedges a whistle blows, a reminder that factories don't take holidays for long. The sound slices through the afternoon like a blade of iron through silk. The park goers flinch, just slightly, as though waking from a dream they knew wouldn't last. The sun dips behind the smoke-laced clouds again, and shadows grow long across the gravel paths. You sit on one last bench before leaving. The iron armrest is cold beneath your hand. A woman walks past humming a hymn, her voice soft and off-key. For a moment you imagine she's singing to the trees themselves. You whisper something back you can't quite hear. Maybe gratitude, maybe envy. When you finally step back through the gates, the air outside feels heavier, like stepping underwater. Behind you the park remains, a green sigh folded neatly inside the city's chest. You look back once, thinking it's strange that even paradise here has a closing time. Then the gates clang shut, and you're back in the crowd, carrying a faint trace of grass on your shoes and an ache that smells like nostalgia. The city no longer speaks in one voice. It mutters, sings, curses and bargains in a dozen tongues that braid together like the smoke above its rooftops. You walk through the market at dawn, and every stall seems to come from a different compass point. Irish women selling bread still warm from coal stoves, Italian men hawking lemons bright as lanterns, German butchers arranging sausages like punctuation marks, Polish tailors arguing over buttons and politics in the same breath. The air trembles with words you half understand and half invent meanings for. A cart rattles past, its driver shouting in something close to English but bent at the edges, and you realize that accent has become the city's new geography. A mainstream historical fact flickers into your mind. By 1900, nearly a third of London's East End was foreign-born, mostly Jewish refugees from Eastern Europe, And in New York's Lower East Side, Yiddish, Italian, and German newspapers outnumbered English ones. You think of that and smile. Cities are dictionaries that never stop updating themselves. You pass an alley where a baker is teaching his son to pronounce flour with an R, both laughing when they fail. Across the street, a Welsh preacher shouts in cadence that could set metal spinning. The clang of hammers from a nearby foundry adds percussion, a rhythmic translation of work. A fringe tidbit bubbles up. Victorian moralists once complained that foreign smells were corrupting English air. Garlic, olive oil, strange spices. Those same scents are now what makes the market worth visiting. You breathe them in, sweet, sharp, smoky, and feel hunger wake inside you. Not just for food, but for the feeling of becoming someone new. The open scholarly debate hums at the edge of your thoughts. Did immigration make modern cities cosmopolitan or merely confused? Looking around, you suspect confusion is cosmopolitanism in its truest form. You stop beside a street singer, a woman in a red scarf singing a ballad that might be French or maybe just sad, and the crowd around her hums along in mismatched keys. No one knows the words, but everyone knows the feeling. It's unity by misunderstanding. A policeman strolls by, pretending not to see an unlicensed performance. Mercy, it seems, is multilingual too. You think of the newspapers calling this the age of progress, though progress here looks like compromise shouted over a fish stall. Children chase each other between barrels, switching languages mid-sentence as easily as they dodge puddles. You watch them, laughing, and realize they're inventing the future's accent in real time. One boy yells, "Mama, look," in Italian, then "Catch me if you can," in perfect East End slang. He will grow up neither one nor the other, but something new, a human chord made of many notes. You wish you could record this noise, this music of collisions. As twilight gathers, lanterns flicker on, lighting the street in gold patches. The market slows, but conversations don't. A Greek grocer and a Scotsman argue about the proper price of olives. Two Irish girls share gossip with a French seamstress about a rumored ball at the mayor's house. No one wins the arguments, but everyone leaves smiling. You hear the rhythm of countless tongues blending into one heartbeat of sound and think, the Tower of Babel didn't fall, it moved here. Learn to trade and rented rooms by the week. You head home through streets that no longer belong to anyone, and therefore belong to everyone. Signs in 5 alphabets hang side by side, words stacked like bricks. You touch one. Paint still tacky, and realize that language, like the city itself, is just another kind of construction, unstable, improvised, eternal. You smile into the hum and whisper a word that isn't yours, tasting it like new bread. It fits. It starts, as it always does, with a cough. A small sound in the corner of a tenement stairwell, swallowed by the noise of footsteps and carts. You barely notice it at first. No one does. But by the end of the week, the cough has learned to echo. The city has fallen ill again. The newspapers call it miasma. The scientists call it cholera. And the people call it God's reminder. You just call it the smell. The same sour metallic stench that seeps from drains and throats alike. It hangs in the air like an unpaid debt. The hospital wards are overflowing, so they open the churches, then the warehouses, then whatever buildings can fit rows of narrow beds. You stand outside one of them, watching nurses in stiff white aprons carrying buckets of water that turn gray before they reach the door. A mainstream historical fact surfaces through the haze. In 1854, Dr. John Snow traced a deadly cholera outbreak in London to a single contaminated water pump on Broad Street, proving that the disease spread not through bad air but through dirty water. You glance down at the puddle under your boots and feel both admiration and terror. Knowledge is as powerful as it is disgusting. The city learns slowly, as most students do. Sanitation reformers sketch maps. Engineers dig trenches. Priests preach hygiene like salvation. A fringe tidbit tickles your mind. One Victorian health crusader proposed perfuming the air with lavender and vinegar from hot air balloons to cleanse the atmosphere of vice. You can't decide whether to laugh or cry at that. The open scholarly debate hums along. Did disease democratize compassion, or just force the rich to notice the poor when contagion ignored their gates? Either way, progress here smells like soap and fear. You walk through the slums of the East End, where water trickles from broken pipes and the walls sweat with humidity. Children sit on stoops, pale and still, their toys forgotten. A woman leans out her window, pouring a bucket of waste into the street, and the splash hits your boot. She doesn't apologize. You don't blame her. Everyone's too busy surviving the curriculum. The city, it seems, teaches by infection. Yet, even here, you see strange acts of grace. A young doctor crouches beside a dying man, holding his hand though there's nothing left to do. A boy delivers bread to a family under quarantine, leaving it on the step and knocking twice before running off. The baker who made that bread will fall sick next week, but tonight he whistles as he works. Humanity, stubborn as mold, always finds a way to grow in filth. Weeks pass, the temperature drops, the coughs fade, slowly replaced by the sound of shovels. The newspapers print new maps of improved water mains and fresh reservoirs, claiming victory over ignorance. You believe them, almost. The city smells cleaner now, but every breeze still carries a hint of rot, as if memory itself has turned microbial. You think of John Snow removing the handle from that pump, a small act of defiance that saved thousands. You whisper, one handle at a time, to the empty street, half prayer, half instruction. By winter, the streets gleam with frost, and you can see your breath in the morning light. It smells sharp, clean, almost innocent. But the lesson lingers. Filth was never just dirt. It was neglect, disguised as inevitability. Disease, cruel and patient, has taught the city how to wash its hands and perhaps its conscience. You pull your scarf tighter and walk toward the river, watching steam rise from sewer grates like ghosts being set free. The city exhales quietly, and you exhale with it. A mainstream historical fact crosses your mind. In 1881, the Savoy Theatre in London became the world's first public building entirely lit by electricity. Crowds lined up outside just to see the miracle of darkness undone. You imagine their faces glowing with reflected awe. It must have felt like seeing the stars step down to street level. You walk now through those same boulevards, brighter, louder, hungrier. Every shop window shouts its wares in light. Even the puddles reflect ambition. The city doesn't end at night anymore. It stretches into forever, pretending it can outrun fatigue. Electricity changes more than sight. It changes time itself. The clock becomes an accessory. Factories run longer. The theaters add extra shows. And the pubs close later, because, as one journalist put it, the night is no longer an argument. You pass a lamplighter leaning on his extinguished pole, now unemployed, muttering to himself about progress with no manners. You nod in sympathy. Every new glow casts a shadow somewhere else. A fringe tidbit sparks in your mind. When Paris installed its first electric street lamps, some citizens fainted from overstimulation, convinced they'd seen the face of God. You understand, this light doesn't just show things, it exposes them. You cross into the entertainment district where cabarets bloom under colored bulbs, each one promising more glitter than truth. Outside one theater, a man in a bowler hat sells postcards of the illuminated skyline. Tiny, hand-tinted miracles of ink. See, he says, it's like the stars moved in with us. You buy one because you can't deny it. The sight of light piling up against the darkness feels like hope pretending to be eternal. The open scholarly debate hums in your thoughts. Did electricity liberate humanity from nature or simply make it forget it was natural at all? You look at your reflection in a shop window, face half lit, half gray, and decide the answers both. Further down the street, an inventor demonstrates his newest marvel, a light bulb glowing beneath a glass dome powered by a hand-cranked generator. Children gasp, adults murmur like they're in church. The inventor wipes sweat from his brow and declares, "Soon there'll be no more night." You shiver. You think of moths, of circadian rhythms, of poets who used to write by candlelight and let the flame decide when to stop. You wonder if progress knows what it's doing to dreams. As the evening deepens, or tries to, the city becomes a constellation of its own making. Bridges sparkle like jewelry, factories glow like lanterns, and people linger in doorways just to bask in brightness. The smell of ozone and coal hangs faintly in the air, sharp as new metal. You spot a woman sitting by a lamppost, reading. The light spills over her hands like liquid silver. She looks up and meets your eyes. "Too bright to hide," she says softly. You nod, not sure whether she means secrets or stars. Midnight arrives without warning. The streets remain crowded, the air restless. The old boundaries, day, night, safe, dangerous, have blurred beyond recognition. Somewhere, a newspaper presses tomorrow's headline in artificial light, and a man in a windowless workshop invents something else that will change everything again. You feel dizzy with it, the unstoppable forwardness of it all. You glance back once toward the dark edges of the city, the alleys still lit only by moonlight, and realize how quiet they seem. Maybe too quiet, maybe beautiful because of it. You step into the glow again, the hum of electricity in your bones, and whisper to yourself, "So this is what dawn feels like when it never ends." The lamp above you flares once, then steadies as if agreeing. You wake before the sun, and the first thing you hear isn't a rooster or a bell. It's the whistle of a train, sharp as an alarm clock carved into metal. It cuts through fog and sleep alike, and you realize that the modern world no longer begins with sunrise, it begins with timetables. You step outside, and the streets are already alive with motion. Boots on cobblestone, wheels on rails, steam on cold air. The city is expanding faster than lungs can keep up with, and suddenly living near your work is optional. Distance has been conquered. Sort of. You follow the current of early risers toward the station, and for the first time you feel like part of a single mechanical organism. The air inside the train station tastes like iron and impatience. 100 voices echo beneath its iron ribs, all saying variations of the same thing. Hurry. You look up, and the ceiling stretches like a glass cathedral. Progress's new heaven. A mainstream historical fact hums at the back of your mind. By the 1880s, rail and tram systems had turned London, Paris, and New York into commuter cities, allowing workers to live miles from the factories and offices that consumed them. A new species was born. The commuter. Half worker, half passenger, always running late. You can hear their call. The rustle of newspapers, the sigh of benches, the synchronized coughing of the modern schedule. You find a seat beside a man already asleep, his briefcase balanced like a fragile secret. Across the aisle, a woman in a hat embroiders flowers on a handkerchief, her needle flashing with every jolt. A child stares at the passing fields as if the world itself were on a reel. Through the window, the city melts into countryside, countryside into factory towns into another city. Everything is in motion. Nothing feels still enough to belong to. A fringe tidbit flickers. When early commuters first took trains out of London, doctors warned that the speed 20 miles an hour might damage the human spine. You smile. Humanity's bones, it turns out, are as adaptable as its ambitions. You pull out your own paper and try to read, but the rhythm of the rails hijacks your focus. Thud, 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 thud. It's hypnotic, like a heartbeat with insomnia. You wonder if the rails themselves dream, endlessly retracing their own path, always forward, never free. The man beside you snores softly, his body sways with the motion, perfectly synchronized to the city's pulse. You realize that in this new world, rest isn't stillness, it's movement performed while pretending not to notice. The open scholarly debate murmurs somewhere in your memory. Did commuting create freedom by connecting people, or captivity by stretching the boundaries of labor? You watch the fog-covered suburbs slide past, rows of identical houses with identical chimneys, and suspect it's both. The train screeches into the next station. Everyone rises at once, as if summoned. You spill into the crowd, carried by momentum. Outside, the air smells faintly of coal and wet paper. Trams rattle by, bells ringing. Bicycles swarm between carriages like daring fish. You join the flow, half walking, half drifting, until you reach a cafe where commuters refuel with cups of black liquid strong enough to wake the dead. The waiter moves like clockwork, his tray always balanced, his smile mechanical but kind. You sip your drink and watch people rush by. You've never seen so many moving so fast to stand so still in offices that never seem to end. When evening comes, you board again, this time in reverse. The train hums with exhaustion. Workers read novels they can't remember. Students nap with ink-stained fingers, and a woman hums softly into her gloves. Outside, lamps blink on in perfect rhythm, each station glowing like punctuation marks in an endless sentence. You think about how the city has learned to inhale in the morning and exhale at night, and how you've become part of its lungs. The view blurs by, but occasionally, between smears of light, you glimpse someone waving from a cottage window or a child chasing the train with outstretched arms. For a moment, it looks like joy. By the time you return home, the sky is black and the platform nearly empty. The echo of your footsteps sounds borrowed, like someone else's life reverberating through yours. You look back once, and the station's great clock looms above you. Luminous, merciless, magnificent. You realize it doesn't mark time anymore. It commands it. You smile, adjust your coat, and whisper to the cold air. Same time tomorrow. The train exhales one last sigh of steam behind you, like an animal settling into sleep, and you walk on, knowing that you will ride again, because motion has become the only kind of stillness the city allows. Morning begins with the sound of heels, confident, deliberate, echoing between shop fronts still half asleep. You pause to watch a woman stride past in a gray jacket trimmed with velvet, her hat pinned like punctuation on a declaration the city isn't ready to read. A decade ago, she would have been an oddity, but now she's a headline. Women in offices, in classrooms, even in factory unions. The street has learned a new rhythm, one that clicks to the pace of ambition disguised as errands. The air smells faintly of starch and revolution. A mainstream historical fact comes to you as you follow her down the street. By the 1890s, more than 1 million British women worked outside the home, from telegraph clerks to typists, teachers, and nurses, earning wages that were technically theirs but socially borrowed. Progress came with a chaperone. You see it now, every bold step shadowed by scrutiny. 2 men near the corner pause mid-conversation just to watch her pass. One smiles, one sneers. Both are equally irrelevant. She doesn't flinch. The street belongs to her, or at least to her footsteps. You wander toward a shop window displaying the latest corsets advertised as hygienic and liberating, a paradox that makes you laugh out loud. Inside, mannequins are bound in silk like small monuments to discomfort. A young clerk behind the counter glances up from her ledger, her fingers ink-stained and deft. "We breathe differently now," she says, half joking, and you realize she's right. Not just physically, but philosophically. The city itself seems to inhale sharper, quicker, testing the limits of decorum. A fringe tidbit bubbles up from your reading. In 1857, American seamstress Amelia Bloomer popularized loose trousers for women. bloomers promptly scandalizing society and being banned from most public spaces. Now, half a century later, women cycle through the parks wearing them, their skirts abbreviated, their laughter unrepentant. You walk by one such group near the bridge, pedaling furiously, hairpins flying like sparks. A policeman looks away, pretending not to notice. Even rules are tired of being rules. At a newspaper kiosk, a headline screams "Votes for Women," and beside it another proclaims "Moral Decline of the Modern Lady." Two gospels sharing one pulpit. The vendor shrugs and says they sell equally well. You buy both, because contradiction is the currency of progress. The open scholarly debate hums behind your thoughts. Did the emergence of women in public life truly mark emancipation, or simply a repackaged form of expectation? Watching them now, typing, marching, laughing, you suspect freedom is always conditional, but still worth the price. You stop for tea at a cafe where women sit alone, reading newspapers or sketching quietly. A group in the corner discuss wages and working hours with the seriousness once reserved for Parliament. The waiter hovers, uncertain whether to treat them as customers or anomalies. You overhear one of them say, "We're not asking permission, we're issuing notice." You nearly applaud. You realize that what's happening isn't just social reform, it's choreography. Every stride, every handshake, every ink mark in a ledger is a step in an unspoken dance toward equality. Outside, the afternoon unfolds like a long exhale. A suffrage march passes by, banners flapping, voices rising in practiced harmony. The chant is both gentle and fierce, like lullabies turned into war songs. Children run alongside, waving paper flags. A man on the sidewalk mutters, "Go home." One marcher answers, "We're already there." You feel the crowd ripple with laughter, relief, pride. You can smell ink and fabric dye and sweat, a perfume of persistence. As the sun sets, gaslights flicker on, casting a golden glow over polished boots and protest ribbons alike. Women linger in the streets longer now, not as company for others but as witnesses to themselves. You pass one standing alone beneath a lamppost, writing something in a small notebook. She glances up briefly and says, "I'm not waiting for anyone." You nod, smile, and move on. When night finally folds itself over the city, the sound of heels continues. Steady, rhythmic, unmistakable. It's the city's new heartbeat. Proof that change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply walks by in good shoes, carrying the future in a handbag. A mainstream historical fact rises through your thoughts. By the late 19th century, strikes and labor movements had become the industrial world's new heartbeat. In 1889, London's dock workers marched for the tanner-a-day wage, an event so massive it paralyzed the port and birthed modern unionism. You imagine that same energy humming now under your feet. Someone nearby begins to sing, slowly, then louder, a rough melody about bread and pride. Others join in, and soon the whole street vibrates with harmony and anger. You walk among them and realize this isn't chaos, it's choreography. Thousands moving as one. Every shout perfectly timed, every silence deliberate. You can see the tension in their hands, hands that have turned wheels, hammered rivets, carried the weight of cities that barely know their names. For the first time, those hands are empty on purpose. A fringe tidbit flickers into your memory. During one great strike in Chicago, mill owners hired an orchestra to play marches outside the factories, hoping the rhythm of patriotism would lure workers back inside. It failed spectacularly. You can't outsing hunger. Police lines form at the edge of the crowd, their helmets gleaming under the pale sky. The city feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Someone throws a handful of soot. It drifts harmlessly through the air but leaves black streaks on blue uniforms. The officers tighten formation, but they don't advance. For once, even authority seems uncertain. You overhear a young woman whisper to her friend, "We've worked for everyone else's comfort. Let's make them uncomfortable." Her voice trembles, not with fear but with conviction. You want to cheer but stay quiet, sensing this moment belongs to her and her kind. The open scholarly debate hums through your head. Did the labor movement truly liberate the working class or merely formalize their captivity in contracts and committees? You look around at faces bright with exhaustion and think maybe the answer doesn't matter right now. Freedom often begins as noise. The banners sway, the singing swells again, and somewhere in the distance a steam whistle shrieks, not from a factory but from a ship leaving the docks, a reminder that movement can mean escape too. Hours pass, the sun climbs high, baking the cobblestones. Vendors appear, selling apples and water, because even revolution gets hungry. Children weave through the crowd with buckets of tea for the marchers. The newspapers arrive next, their reporters scribbling frantic notes that will later turn courage into copy. You imagine tomorrow's headline, "Disorder in the Streets. Citizens Demand Justice." You laugh quietly at the contradiction. Disorder and justice have always shared a bed. Then, as suddenly as it began, the standoff cracks. An older man, foreman, maybe, steps forward from the crowd and speaks to the constables. You can't hear the words, only see the gestures. Open palms, nods, weary smiles. The police ease back, the banners lower. The crowd doesn't cheer, they just exhale, as if remembering how someone shouts, "We'll be heard again tomorrow," and laughter follows, ragged but genuine. You realize this was never about winning. It's about being seen. When evening comes, the streets empty slowly. The factory doors remain closed, the machines still silent. You walk past one window and see your reflection doubled by the glass, soot-streaked, tired, strangely proud. Behind you, the last of the strikers hum their song into the cooling air, voices fading like steam. You stop and listen until it's gone. The silence that follows isn't emptiness, it's potential, humming low, waiting for morning. The city will wake again, and the whistles will blow, but tonight they belong to the workers. The sound of industry is on strike, and for the first time it sounds like hope. The first telegraph line hums faintly above your head, like a taut string on the world's new instrument. It stretches from post to post, from city to city, carrying whispers faster than wind. You look up, squinting through the haze, and the wires gleam in the late afternoon light, slender veins of ambition threading through the skyline. It's beautiful, in a fragile metallic way. The city has learned to speak, and the language it's chosen is speed. Inside a telegraph office, men and women sit hunched over keys, tapping messages that sound like rainfall. Click, click, pause, click, click, click. Every tap means something. Love, loss, trade, war, compressed into the smallest possible space. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. By the 1870s, the first global telegraph cables linked continents across oceans, shrinking the planet to the size of a conversation. Empires once separated by months now, argued in minutes. The Earth itself, some said, had finally found its nervous system. You watch a young operator grin as a message arrives from Paris, his finger tracing the printed words like scripture. Outside, the newspaper boys are already shouting headlines barely an hour old. Crisis in Vienna confirmed. The ink is still wet, the shock still fresh, and you realize that the modern world's pulse isn't in its factories, it's in these wires. The fringe tidbit that floats into your thoughts makes you smile. Early telegraph companies once hired translators to convert emotional letters into formal code, creating the first emoji tables of history. Dots and dashes for heartbreak, celebration, apology. Humanity, it seems, can't help but send feelings through machines. You step outside again, following the web of wires as they vanish into the horizon. The poles hum faintly in the wind, each one a century of connection. Beneath your feet, the electric tram clatters past, sparks snapping from its roof into the night like fireflies. Overhead, telephone lines join the older telegraph cables, doubling the tangle. You stop at a corner cafe where a group of clerks talk excitedly about instant contact. One says his cousin in Boston spoke through a wire, actual speech, not code. And another laughs, saying, "Next thing you know, they'll be selling silence." The open scholarly debate hums along. Did the telegraph and telephone connect the world or simply make distance a different kind of illusion? You think of the lovers, the traders, the generals, all tethered by invisible cords, and wonder if connection can ever exist without captivity. The city is louder now, not because of footsteps, but because of the invisible traffic of words. Somewhere, a cable hums beneath the river. Somewhere else, a switch clicks and two strangers hear each other for the first time. You wander home as dusk deepens, the wires glowing faintly in reflected lamplight. They crisscross above the streets like constellations built by human hands. Our new stars, buzzing softly, tireless, indifferent. You imagine the messages coursing through them. Gossip, weather, poetry, despair. All of it compressed into rhythm, into current, into light. The city doesn't dream of quiet anymore. It dreams in wires. And tonight, those dreams hum louder than prayers. You wake into a city so bright, it almost forgets to blink. Electric light spills from every window. Advertisements crawl across rooftops like restless constellations, and the air itself seems to glitter with impatience. Progress no longer whispers. It hums. The streets are paved not just with stone, but with illusion. Posters promising faster trains, safer factories, cleaner air. You laugh quietly. You've lived long enough to know that every promise here cost someone their lungs. Still, you can't look away. The city has become its own spectacle, and you are both the audience and the exhibit. You wander through the new department stores, cathedrals of commerce glowing beneath glass ceilings. Perfume, silk, machinery, and books all arranged with the reverence once reserved for saints. Shoppers drift past, wide-eyed, their reflections multiplied in every polished surface. A mainstream historical fact floats up from memory. By the turn of the 20th century, cities like Paris and New York had turned consumption into leisure, with arcades and shop windows designed to make desire perpetual. You feel it too, that subtle seduction of seeing so much that you start believing you deserve all of it. In a corner, a young boy stares at a display of electric toys, his face lit in perfect contrast, half wonder, half warning. You watch him press his nose to the glass, and for a moment you see the whole century in that reflection. Hope dressed as merchandise. A fringe tidbit flickers. One Parisian shopkeeper once installed mirrors angled to make customers appear taller and thinner, claiming it improved their confidence to spend. Modernity, you think, has a sense of humor, one that always charges interest. You step back into the street, where automobiles glide past like ghosts made of iron. The noise is a new kind of heartbeat, sharp, mechanical, decisive. Overhead, billboards shout in color, their painted faces smiling with eternal satisfaction. You pause beneath one advertising a brand of soap promising purity and progress. The irony is so heavy you almost applaud. A woman beside you mutters, "If only it could wash the air." You smile. Cynicism is the city's new accent. The open scholarly debate hums somewhere in your mind. Is modernity salvation or sleight of hand? A trick of reflection, convincing us we're improving simply because we shine brighter. You watch a tram glide by, filled with commuters reading headlines about the age of innovation, and you wonder if they believe it. Maybe they have to. The city runs on optimism the way its engines run on coal. Dirty fuel disguised as momentum. As dusk falls, neon signs begin their nightly sermon. Words pulse in color across the skyline. Believe, buy, build. The crowd obeys, almost gratefully. Even the rain seems choreographed, reflecting every color back to the heavens like applause. You catch your own reflection in a puddle, fragmented by ripples, and think how modern life feels exactly like that. Sharp, shimmering, impossible to hold. You wander toward the edge of town, where the lights thin out and the silence grows thicker. Behind you, the city glows like a machine dreaming of eternity. Ahead, the countryside waits, dark and indifferent. You take one last look at the skyline. Glass, steel, motion, and whisper. You look magnificent, darling, but I can still smell the smoke. The wind doesn't answer. It doesn't need to. The shimmer fades with the horizon, leaving you between two worlds, one shining, one honest, and both undeniably human. It's late now, so late that the streetlights hum softer, their glow dimmed by exhaustion rather than design. The last tram has clattered away, the last newspaper folded under someone's arm, and the city, that restless creature of iron and breath, finally begins to close its eyes. You walk alone beneath the trembling wires, past windows that used to burn all night and now blink out one by one, like stars obeying curfew. The air tastes of rain and rust and faint electricity, the perfume of a day that has finally given up on itself. Somewhere, a clock strikes 2, slow, deliberate, echoing off the bricks like a heartbeat fading into sleep. You keep walking, because that's what you do here. Keep walking until motion itself slows you down. The cobblestones glisten, wet as if someone had washed the whole city clean for morning. You pass an open door where a baker kneads dough in silence, his rhythm slower, gentler than the day's frantic pulse. Steam curls around him like ghostly applause. The city's breath, you realize, never really stops. It just changes tempo. A cat slips through an alley. A watchman yawns, and somewhere in the fog, a single whistle blows melancholy, almost tender. You pause on a bridge and look down at the river. The water moves like memory, slow, heavy, but constant. Its surface catches the reflection of the lamps, scattered gold trembling over darkness. The same river that once reeked of death and ambition now looks peaceful, like it's forgiven everything. You lean on the railing and close your eyes. The city hums beneath your feet, faint but steady as if dreaming of itself. You think about everything it survived. Fire, plague, smoke, greed, and marvel that it can still find beauty in its own ruin. A window creaks open behind you, and an old woman shakes out a blanket into the night air. "Still awake?" she calls softly, half amusement, half concern. You smile and answer, "Just listening." She laughs a small sleepy sound and says, "Then good night to you, whoever you are." You raise your hand in a silent wave as her shutters close. That's enough conversation for an entire century. As you walk home, your footsteps sound heavier, slower. The rain begins again, but it's kind now, more lullaby than punishment. The lamps blur behind a curtain of drizzle, and you imagine the city sighing in relief, every brick loosening, every window dreaming of daylight. Even the smoke from the chimneys drifts lazily, no longer racing toward the sky but curling inward, as if tucking itself in. You reach your door and pause one last time to look back. The skyline, once all edges and arrogance, now looks almost human, softened by shadow. You whisper, "Rest now, you've earned it." And in the distance, thunder murmurs approval. Inside, the warmth feels undeserved but welcome. You sit by the window and watch the faint glow fade from the horizon. The machines are still, the voice is gone, and for the first time you hear the city's real heartbeat, silence. You breathe in, long and deep, letting the air settle inside you, thick with history and hope. Then, as the last lamp flickers out, you smile and close your eyes too. Sweet dreams.